You're sitting in your car outside her apartment at 2 a.m. staring at your phone. She hasn't responded to your text from 6 hours ago. Your chest feels tight. Your mind is racing through every possible explanation for her silence, and you're fighting the urge to send another message that will make you look desperate. This isn't the first time. It's not even the 10th time. You've been here before with other women. Different faces, same feeling. That sinking sensation when she pulls away, the anxiety when she doesn't respond immediately, the crushing weight when she eventually says she's not ready for anything serious. You tell yourself this time will be different. Next time you'll be stronger, more confident, less affected by whatever game she's playing. But deep down you know you're lying to yourself. Because the problem isn't her game, it's that you keep showing up to play it. Today, I'm going to show you how to become the kind of man who never gets hurt by women again. Not because you build walls, not because you become cold or indifferent, but because you develop something infinitely more powerful, complete immunity to external validation, and the unshakable knowledge of your own worth. Most men believe they can protect themselves from emotional pain by controlling how women treat them. They think if they're attractive enough, successful enough, charming enough, or strategic enough, they can guarantee good treatment from the women they pursue. This belief creates a psychological prison where your emotional state depends entirely on female behavior that you cannot actually control. You become a hostage to every text message, every change in tone, every shift in her interest level. Your mood rises and falls based on signals from someone whose thoughts and feelings are completely outside your influence. The desperate pursuit of control manifests in countless ways. You analyze her messages for hidden meanings. You modify your behavior to avoid triggering her negative reactions. You strategize about when to text, what to say, how to act to maintain her interest. You become a performer in your own life, constantly adjusting your character to meet someone else's expectations. But here's the brutal truth. You cannot control how anyone treats you. You cannot guarantee that your efforts will be rewarded. You cannot prevent someone from losing interest, changing their mind, or choosing someone else. The more energy you invest in trying to control outcomes you cannot control, the more powerless you become. This powerlessness creates the very neediness and desperation that repels the women you're trying to attract. When your emotional stability depends on their approval, you unconsciously communicate that dependency through your behavior. Women can sense this desperation, and it makes you less attractive rather than more attractive. The solution isn't better control strategies, it's abandoning the illusion of control entirely. True strength comes from recognizing what you cannot control and focusing exclusively on what you can control, your own thoughts, reactions, and choices. The pain you feel when women reject, ignore, or mistreat you doesn't actually come from their actions. It comes from what their actions trigger inside you: old wounds, unresolved insecurities, and stories you tell yourself about what their behavior means about your worth as a man. When she doesn't text back, the pain isn't caused by the absence of a message. It's caused by the narrative your mind creates. She's losing interest. I'm not good enough. I'm going to be alone forever. The external event is neutral. The internal interpretation creates the suffering. When she chooses someone else, the devastation isn't caused by her choice. It's caused by the meaning you assign to that choice. I'm not attractive enough. I always lose to better men. I'll never find a love. Her decision is just information. Your interpretation transforms that information into psychological torture. This distinction is crucial because it reveals where your actual power lies. You cannot control her responses, but you can control your interpretations. You cannot control her choices, but you can control the stories you tell yourself about what those choices mean. Most men never realize this because they're focused on changing external circumstances rather than addressing internal reactions. They try to become more attractive, more successful, more charming, believing that if they can just get better results from women, they'll feel better about themselves. But this approach ensures continued suffering because it makes your emotional well-being dependent on factors outside your control. Even if you improve your results with women, you'll still be vulnerable to pain whenever those results don't meet your expectations. The real battlefield where emotional pain is won or lost exists in your unconscious mind. The repository of every wound, rejection, and traumatic experience that has shaped your relationship with yourself and others. Until you bring this unconscious material into conscious awareness, it will continue to control your reactions to external events. Your unconscious mind contains the programming that determines how you interpret female behavior. If you experienced early rejection from your mother, you might unconsciously interpret any female withdrawal as evidence of your fundamental unlovability. If you were emotionally neglected as a child, you might unconsciously seek validation from women to fill that void. These unconscious patterns operate automatically, triggering emotional reactions that seem disproportionate to current circumstances. When a woman you barely know cancels a date, you feel devastated not because her cancellation is objectively devastating, but because it activates unconscious fears about abandonment or rejection. The unconscious also contains defense mechanisms developed to protect you from pain. Strategies like emotional withdrawal, aggressive pursuit, or desperate people-pleasing that once helped you survive difficult situations, but now sabotage your relationships. These patterns remain invisible until external events trigger them. Then you find yourself reacting with intensity that surprises you, feeling emotions that seem too big for the situation, or behaving in ways that contradict your conscious intentions. Healing these unconscious wounds requires bringing them into conscious awareness where they can be examined, understood, and integrated. This process is uncomfortable because it involves feeling the pain you've been avoiding, but it's the only way to stop being controlled by forces you don't understand. The path to emotional immunity doesn't involve building walls around your heart or becoming indifferent to female attention. It involves integrating all aspects of yourself, including the wounded, needy, and vulnerable parts, into a coherent whole that cannot be destabilized by external circumstances. Integration means acknowledging and accepting every part of your psychological makeup, rather than trying to eliminate the parts you consider weak or unacceptable. You stop fighting against your need for connection, your desire for love, your fear of rejection, and instead embrace these as natural human experiences that don't define your worth. This process requires confronting the persona you've constructed to hide your authentic self from others. The persona is the mask you wear to appear strong, confident, and unaffected, while your real self remains hidden behind walls of protection and performance. Dismantling the persona is terrifying because it means revealing the parts of yourself you've been taught to hide. It means admitting that you want love, that rejection hurts, that you sometimes feel insecure or afraid. But this vulnerability is actually strength, because it comes from choice rather than neediness. When you integrate your shadow, the rejected aspects of yourself, they lose their power to control you unconsciously. Your need for validation becomes conscious choice rather than compulsive behavior. Your fear of rejection becomes information rather than paralyzing anxiety. Integration also involves accepting that pain is part of the human experience rather than something to be avoided at all costs. When you stop running from discomfort, it stops chasing you. When you stop resisting difficult emotions, they stop controlling your behavior. Becoming immune to female manipulation and rejection requires what psychologists call individuation, the process of becoming a complete individual rather than a collection of reactions to other people's behavior. This means developing an internal reference point that remains stable regardless of external circumstances. Individuation begins with recognizing that you've been living according to other people's expectations rather than your own authentic nature. You've been trying to be the man you think women want rather than the man you actually are. This external orientation makes you vulnerable to manipulation because your identity depends on approval from others. The process involves developing genuine self-knowledge through honest self-examination. This means identifying your actual values, desires, strengths, and weaknesses, rather than the idealized version you present to others. It means understanding what you actually want from relationships, rather than what you think you should want. Individuation requires developing internal validation systems that don't depend on external feedback. This means learning to recognize your own worth based on your character, values, and choices rather than on how others respond to you. It means developing the capacity to feel good about yourself even when others don't appreciate you. This process is lonely because it involves separating from the collective expectations that have shaped your identity. You stop trying to fit in with groups that require you to suppress your authentic self. You stop seeking approval from people whose approval requires you to betray your own nature. Individuation also involves developing emotional self-regulation, the ability to manage your internal state regardless of external circumstances. This means learning to comfort yourself when you're hurt, Motivate yourself when you're discouraged, and maintain perspective when you're triggered. If you're starting to understand that your vulnerability to female rejection comes from internal wounds rather than external circumstances, and that healing those wounds is the key to emotional freedom, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. What I'm revealing today about psychological immunity could transform your entire relationship with yourself and others. The moment you take complete responsibility for your emotional reactions, you reclaim power over your inner world. This doesn't mean blaming yourself for what others do to you. It means recognizing that your response to their actions is entirely within your control. Taking responsibility means acknowledging that no one can make you feel anything without your unconscious participation. When you feel devastated by rejection, you're participating in that devastation through the stories you tell yourself and the meanings you assign to the experience. This responsibility extends to the relationships you choose and the dynamics you enable. If you consistently attract women who treat you poorly, you're participating in creating those dynamics through your selection criteria, boundary setting, and response patterns. Responsibility also means acknowledging that you've been using external validation as a drug to avoid facing internal emptiness or pain. You've been seeking from women what you should be providing for yourself: worth, security, purpose, and love. Taking responsibility is initially painful because it means giving up the victim narrative that protects you from accountability. It's easier to blame women for being cruel, society for being unfair, or circumstances for being difficult than to acknowledge your role in creating your experiences. But responsibility is also liberation, because it reveals your power to change your circumstances by changing yourself. When you stop waiting for external conditions to improve and start improving your internal condition, you become the author of your own experience rather than a victim of others' choices. This responsibility revolution transforms how you approach relationships. Instead of trying to get something from women, you focus on what you can give. Instead of needing them to behave certain ways to feel good about yourself, you feel good about yourself regardless of their behavior. Emotional sovereignty means developing the capacity to maintain your internal equilibrium regardless of external turbulence. This doesn't mean becoming emotionless. It means becoming emotionally self-sufficient so that your feelings inform you rather than control you. Sovereignty begins with understanding that emotions are information, not commands. When you feel rejected, that feeling is providing information about a trigger, not commanding you to desperately pursue approval. When you feel lonely, that emotion is highlighting a need for connection, not demanding that you settle for poor treatment. Developing sovereignty requires learning to sit with difficult emotions without immediately acting to eliminate them. Most men try to escape uncomfortable feelings through distraction, numbing, or compulsive behavior. Sovereignty means feeling the discomfort fully while maintaining conscious choice about how to respond. This capacity develops through practice with smaller emotional challenges before you face major relationship crises. You learn to tolerate minor rejections without reactive behavior, to handle criticism without defensive responses, to experience disappointment without desperate attempts to change outcomes. Emotional sovereignty also involves developing internal sources of the feelings you've been seeking from women. Instead of needing female approval to feel worthy, you cultivate self-appreciation. Instead of requiring female attention to feel significant, you develop purpose. Instead of depending on female affection to feel loved, you practice self-compassion. When you achieve emotional sovereignty, women's behavior toward you becomes irrelevant to your internal state. Their approval is nice but not necessary. Their rejection is disappointing but not devastating. Their games are interesting but not engaging. The paradox of emotional immunity is that the less you need female validation, the more attractive you become to quality women. When you stop being desperate for approval, you naturally embody the confidence and self-possession that women find irresistible. This attraction isn't based on manipulation or playing hard to get. It's based on authentic self-sufficiency that communicates high value without effort. Women are attracted to men who seem complete in themselves, rather than men who need completion from others. Your immunity to their rejection makes you more selective about which women you invest in, which naturally increases your value in their eyes. When you're not desperate to win over every woman you meet, you can afford to have standards and enforce boundaries. This selectivity also protects you from the women who are attracted to neediness and drama. The women who lose interest when you're not chasing them are revealing that they were never genuinely interested in you as a person. They were interested in the validation they received from your pursuit. The women who remain interested when you're emotionally self-sufficient are the ones worth investing in because their attraction is based on who you are rather than what you provide for their ego. These women want partnership rather than worship, connection rather than control. Your emotional immunity also makes you more attractive because it eliminates the desperate energy that repels quality women. When you're not afraid of losing her, you can be authentic rather than performing. When you're not trying to prevent rejection, you can focus on creating genuine connection. Every woman who has ever hurt you has done you a favor by revealing an unhealed wound that needed attention. Your triggers are maps to your unconscious programming, showing you exactly where you need to do healing work to become truly free. Instead of avoiding situations that trigger you, use them as opportunities for growth. When you feel that familiar pain of rejection or abandonment, instead of trying to eliminate the pain, investigate what it's showing you about your internal landscape. Each trigger contains information about limiting beliefs you've developed about yourself, love, and relationships. The pain of being ignored might reveal beliefs about your fundamental unimportance. The agony of being replaced might expose fears about your inadequacy compared to other men. Transforming triggers requires feeling them fully while questioning the stories they're based on. Most of your emotional pain comes from interpretations rather than facts. She didn't text back, but the story that she's losing interest is just one possible interpretation among many. This transformation work is best done outside of active relationships, when you can examine patterns without the emotional intensity of current romantic drama. Use periods of singleness to heal wounds and develop immunity, rather than desperately seeking the next relationship to distract from internal pain. The goal isn't to eliminate all emotional responses to female behavior. It's to ensure that your responses are proportionate to current reality rather than amplified by past wounds. A healthy man might feel disappointed by rejection, but he won't be devastated by it. True immunity to female manipulation comes from developing an unshakable masculine core, a sense of purpose, strength, and direction that exists independently of any woman's opinion of you. This core becomes your reference point for making decisions and evaluating relationships. The masculine core is built through pursuing goals that matter to you regardless of their impact on your dating life. This might involve career advancement, physical fitness, creative projects, spiritual development, or service to others. The key is that these pursuits fulfill you intrinsically rather than serving as strategies to attract women. Developing your core also involves cultivating masculine friendships and community connections that provide support and accountability independent of romantic relationships. Many men become isolated and dependent on female validation because they lack strong connections with other men. The core includes physical practices that connect you with your body and natural masculine energy. This might involve strength training, martial arts, outdoor activities, or other pursuits that develop physical capability and confidence. Physical strength supports emotional strength by providing tangible evidence of your capability. Intellectual development is also crucial for building your core. This involves reading, learning, developing expertise, and engaging with ideas that expand your understanding of yourself and the world. A well-developed mind is less susceptible to manipulation and more capable of independent thinking. The spiritual dimension of masculine core development involves connecting with something larger than yourself, whether through religious practice, philosophical study, service to others, or connection with nature. This spiritual foundation provides perspective that makes romantic drama seem less significant. Developing immunity to female manipulation requires revolutionizing your approach to boundaries, moving from reactive boundary violations to proactive boundary enforcement based on your core values and self-respect. Most men have weak boundaries because they're afraid that enforcing limits will cause women to lose interest. They tolerate disrespectful treatment, accept poor communication, and allow their time and energy to be wasted because they prioritize keeping women around over maintaining their dignity. Revolutionary boundaries start with identifying your non-negotiables, behaviors you will not tolerate regardless of how attracted you are to someone. These might include dishonesty, disrespect, emotional manipulation, or consistent unreliability. Once identified, these boundaries must be enforced without exception. Boundary enforcement doesn't require anger, aggression, or lengthy explanations. It simply requires consistent action that demonstrates you value yourself too much to accept poor treatment. When someone violates your boundaries, you reduce their access to your time, energy, and attention. The fear that enforcing boundaries will drive women away is often accurate. It will drive away women who are planning to treat you poorly. This is a feature, not a bug. You want to filter out women who lose interest when you demonstrate self-respect because they were never good long-term prospects anyway. Quality women respect men who have boundaries because boundaries indicate self-respect, which is attractive and creates safety in relationships. Women want men who cannot be easily manipulated or controlled because such men provide security and leadership. Boundary enforcement also protects you from your own tendency to overinvest in women who aren't reciprocating your energy. When you maintain strict limits on how much you'll invest without reciprocation, you avoid the resentment and desperation that comes from one-sided relationships. True immunity to female rejection requires building a life so fulfilling and complete that romantic relationships become an enhancement rather than a necessity. This means developing independence in every area of life where you might be tempted to depend on women for fulfillment. Emotional independence involves developing the capacity to regulate your own emotions, provide your own comfort, and maintain your own motivation without requiring external support. This doesn't mean never seeking emotional connection. It means not needing it for basic psychological functioning. Social independence requires building diverse social connections that don't depend on romantic relationships. This includes male friendships, family connections, professional relationships, and community involvement that provides social fulfillment regardless of your dating status. Financial independence is crucial for relationship freedom because financial dependence creates power imbalances that can be exploited. When you can support yourself comfortably without requiring financial contribution from a partner, you're free to choose relationships based on compatibility rather than necessity. Domestic independence means developing the skills to manage your own household, cooking, cleaning, and daily maintenance without requiring female assistance. Many men unconsciously seek relationships to outsource domestic responsibilities, which creates dependency that undermines attraction. Recreational independence involves developing hobbies, interests, and activities that you enjoy regardless of whether anyone joins you. This prevents the boredom and emptiness that drives many men to desperately seek female companionship for entertainment. Sexual independence is perhaps the most controversial aspect, but developing the ability to manage sexual needs without becoming desperate for female sexual access prevents the neediness that makes men vulnerable to sexual manipulation and poor relationship choices. The ultimate protection against female manipulation comes from expanding your consciousness to see relationship dynamics clearly rather than being caught up in emotional reactivity. This expanded awareness allows you to observe patterns, recognize manipulation, and make conscious choices about how to respond. Consciousness expansion begins with developing the ability to observe your own thoughts and emotions rather than being completely identified with them. When you can watch your neediness arise without being controlled by it, you gain power over your reactions. This awareness extends to recognizing female behavior patterns and understanding the psychological mechanisms behind them. When you understand that her hot and cold behavior is often a strategy to maintain control rather than genuine confusion about her feelings, you can respond strategically rather than reactively. Expanded consciousness also involves understanding your own patterns and triggers so you can catch yourself before falling into familiar traps. When you recognize your tendency to over-pursue when someone pulls away, you can choose different responses that serve your interests better. This consciousness includes understanding the difference between authentic feminine behavior and manipulative performance. Quality women don't need to create drama, confusion, or emotional chaos to maintain your interest because they have genuine value to offer. Consciousness expansion also involves developing perspective about the relative importance of romantic relationships in the context of your entire life. When you understand that your worth isn't determined by romantic success, rejection becomes much less threatening. The truth about becoming immune to female rejection is that immunity doesn't come from avoiding women or building walls around your heart. It comes from healing the internal wounds that make you vulnerable to external manipulation and developing such a strong sense of self that no one else's opinion can destabilize your inner foundation. This immunity isn't about becoming cold, indifferent, or incapable of love. It's about loving from a position of strength rather than neediness, choosing from abundance rather than scarcity, and giving from fullness rather than emptiness. When you achieve this immunity, you stop attracting women who want to hurt you because you stop being attractive to women who are drawn to neediness and weakness. Your emotional strength naturally filters out manipulative women while attracting women who are capable of genuine partnership. The process of developing immunity is challenging because it requires facing everything you've been avoiding: your wounds, your fears, your authentic self, and your real needs. But this challenge is also the path to freedom because everything you avoid controls you until you face it directly. True immunity means that rejection becomes information rather than devastation, that criticism becomes feedback rather than attack, that female behavior becomes data rather than emotional trigger. You remain open to connection while being protected from manipulation. This protection doesn't guarantee that you'll never feel disappointed, hurt, or sad about relationship outcomes. It guarantees that these feelings won't destroy you, control you, or define you. You'll feel them fully and then return to your center, your purpose, and your power. The man who achieves this immunity becomes naturally attractive to quality women because he embodies the strength, independence, and emotional stability that healthy women seek in partners. Paradoxically, by no longer needing female approval, he becomes worthy of it. If this guide to developing immunity from female rejection has shown you that the path to relationship freedom lies through internal healing rather than external strategies, subscribe to this channel for more insights into building unshakable masculine confidence. Hit that notification bell because understanding these principles could free you from the emotional roller coaster that keeps most men trapped in cycles of neediness and rejection. Share this video with any man who's tired of being hurt by women and wants to understand that true protection comes from inner strength rather than emotional walls. The difference between men who get hurt repeatedly and men who remain unshakable is the difference between those who seek completion from others and those who complete themselves.